Hi, I'm Zoe Bentley. This is Exogeology ROCKS, Episode 4. Today I'm going to interview astronaut Mark Kelly. I'm here today with Captain Mark Kelly, a NASA astronaut. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I'm currently the commander of what is presently scheduled to be the last space shuttle flight. I've been in the astronaut office for 14 years. I've flown 3 missions on the space shuttle, all to the space station. My last one I brought up a Japanese laboratory, and this next flight I bring up this very complicated physics experiment.
How did you get interested in this field?
So I'm a Navy test pilot.
Okay.
Before that, I was a pilot flying off of the aircraft carrier, and then I went to grad school. I became a Navy test pilot, and then in 1995, I applied to be an astronaut and was fortunate enough to be selected. And then in 1996, I started at NASA.
Oh, that's exciting. Did you always want to be an astronaut as a kid, or did you decide that later on?
Yeah, I don't think I did. I mean, it was something I remember being interested in, and I was born in 1964, so I remember seeing the later Apollo flights, and I remember being interested in it, but it wasn't until I was in the Navy that I really thought this is something I might pursue.
How many times have you been into space? So
I've been in space 3 times so far. First flight was in 2001, and then I flew again in 2006 and 2008, and then this coming February.
Do you get used to it, or is it still exciting?
Oh, it's very exciting. I actually look forward to the next flight even more than the last one. You know, I really do enjoy it. The first one, there's a lot of uncertainty there, but it's a lot of fun.
Do you plan ahead to have the perfect phrase like Neil Armstrong's "one small step"?
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Do you plan this ahead of time, and do you talk about this with the other astronauts?
Well, so as the commander of the space shuttle, we actually give a little speech right before we launch. It's about like 30 seconds long. And I actually did think about that ahead of time. It's significant. I was bringing up this Japanese payload. And then for a very odd reason, I decided right at the last minute I needed to change it, like 5 minutes before launch. And so I had to rewrite it on my knee board. But yeah, you think about those. I really don't discuss it with my crew members, though. Because then you have like a committee that has to come up with the words. It's not that important.
Do you feel more pressured to get exactly the right words for this next mission, since it's the last space shuttle mission?
Well, that's a good question. And I've thought about that, because if we are the last space shuttle flight, and it hasn't been decided yet, but if we were to be the last shuttle flight, those things do become a little bit more significant. So I will spend a good amount of time thinking about what we're going to say right before liftoff, when we dock to the space station, when we undock from the space station, and then when we land. Those are significant events. So I'll think ahead of time about what I'm going to say.
Other than going into space, do you travel much?
Other than going into space? Yeah, I do. A little good amount. Travel for work. Right now is July of 2010, and this month I've got to go to Boulder, Colorado to there's doing some testing on one of the experiments that's going to be aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour. And then that same week, then I have to fly to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And go to the Naval Research Lab to see some hardware that we're going to put on the outside of the space station. And then just next week, I've got to go to New Orleans to see the last rollout, to be there when they take our external tank out of the factory before they put it on the barge to send it to Florida. So yeah, we do travel quite a bit.
How many other astronauts do you know?
Well, I know all of them. There's only 100 of us or so, and we all are in the same office. At the Johnson Space Center, we have the entire floor of an office building, and then half of another floor underneath it. So all the U.S. astronauts are there. Some of the Russian cosmonauts, they travel back and forth. And then the European Space Agency astronauts, the Canadian Space Agency astronauts, and the Japanese Space Agency astronauts are all all there in that building of the Johnson Space Center. So we're a pretty tight group.
What's it like being in zero gravity?
Well, being in zero gravity is pretty amazing. If you remember, maybe when you were younger, you used to imagine what it was like to fly around like Superman.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what you're able to do. And it's really neat to be able to, if I was to, in zero gravity, if I was to, just to hold something up and let go of it and it just stays there, man, it's pretty amazing. No, it's a lot of fun.
What's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you in zero G?
On my last flight, I was spinning around in the Japanese laboratory that we had just installed on the space station. And before I did that, I told my crew members, let me know if I'm going to hit my head. And I do this flip, and right as I started, they said, you're going to hit your head. And sure enough, I smacked my head right on this rail. Then they laughed. It was pretty funny.
What are some jobs that you've had before being an astronaut?
My first job, when I was probably about 10, is I delivered newspapers. And then I worked in the Dairy Queen. I'd mop up when it was closing. That was my job, to go in there and just mop the floors. I actually quit that job when I found the owner of the Dairy Queen was also cleaning out the machines with the same mop, the ice cream machine. That wasn't good. So I left that job. Then I made pizzas for a while. Then I drove an ambulance when I was in high school. Did that even into college a little bit. And then I went to the Merchant Marine Academy. And when I graduated, I went right into the Navy, to Navy Flight School. And I'm on active duty in the Navy. I've been in the Navy 24 years.
What's the most exciting thing that's ever happened to you on the job?
Well, launching and climbing into the space shuttle and getting strapped in and launching into space is pretty exciting. So I've got to do that 3 times.
Yeah, that would be. What's it like training to be an astronaut?
Well, the training for a mission lasts about 13 months. Unless there's delays, like in this case, my training for this flight will be well over a year and a half. A lot of time in the simulator, a lot of time flying airplanes. We have these T-38s that we fly, just to keep our currency as a pilot, and practice a lot of landings, do a lot of stuff in the classroom. Very, kind of diverse kind of training, so it never gets boring.
Is it very different flying an airplane than the space shuttle?
Well, so the space shuttle is a rocket ship on liftoff. It's a spaceship on orbit. It's an airplane coming home. It's a very good spaceship. It's a pretty good rocket ship. It's not a good airplane. To fly a winged vehicle into the atmosphere at Mach 25, and it's a glider. You start over the Indian Ocean and you glide all the way back to Florida. Very complicated thing to do that safely every time. So it doesn't fly really well, so we practice a lot. And as you probably know, when it's time to land, we don't have any engines. So it's a glider, but it has what are considered pretty poor flying qualities, like how well does it fly? It doesn't fly very well.
What exactly did you have to train for this mission?
Well, we're doing a bunch of different things. We're installing 2 payloads. One is this alpha magnetic spectrometer I talked about. The other is this logistics carrier with some spare parts. We're going to do 3 spacewalks. So I have 3 crew members that'll alternate going outside 2 at a time for these 3 spacewalks. We've got to transfer a lot of cargo over to the space station. And then it's all this typical stuff of flying the space shuttle, getting it successfully into space, getting it configured as a spaceship, rendezvousing with the space station and docking with it, and then undoing everything and coming home at the end of 13 days.
Can you tell us a bit more detail about the goals of this mission?
Well, we've got, so we have for every space shuttle flight, there's a whole list of goals, and we put them in order of how we want to complete them. And, whether it's transferring a crew member to the space station or replenishing the oxygen on the space station. In our case, we have these 2 primary payloads, and then we're going to resupply some oxygen and nitrogen. We've got 3 spacewalks to do, and they have all individual tasks within them. So we've got this whole list. It's it's about a 4 or 5 page document that prioritizes the goals of the mission.
So what exactly is your role?
So I am the commander of the space shuttle.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got 5 other crew members, and they work for me, but we essentially work as a team. But it's my responsibility to make sure the mission is safely executed and completed. So I kind of oversee the other folks. I have individual stuff that I more or less take care of, but my main job is to supervise the rest of the crew.
So you have to know a little bit of everything then?
A little bit of it, yes. Yeah, pretty much.
I was wondering, why does the mission keep getting delayed?
Well, our mission was delayed once for our payload not being ready. They had to make a major change to the alpha magnetic spectrometer. So it had to go, it was in a place called STEC in the Netherlands, had to go back to Geneva to make a major change to it. Now it's going to fly to Florida in August. Our mission was delayed a second time because the mission before ours, they are awaiting some spare parts to put in their logistics module to take to the space station. And we couldn't fly the missions that close together. So since they moved a little bit, we wound up moving a couple months.
Okay. What does your family think of you going into space?
Well, the kids, they're always excited about going to Florida for a space shuttle launch. My twin brother's also an astronaut. He's flown 2 space shuttle missions.
So I bet that avoids the twin paradox, huh?
Yeah, that's right. So we have 5 shuttle flights between us. So they've always grown up. I mean, my daughter Claire, when my brother first flew, was 2. My younger daughter and my older daughter was 4.5. So they've spent their whole life growing up, going to Florida to watch either me or their uncle launch on the space shuttle. And so they're excited about it. They worry a little bit because it is a risky job, but they like it. They get to go surfing too when they go down there.
Do you have any advice for kids who want to be astronauts?
I do. I think the most important thing is to do well in school first, because that gives you a lot of opportunities. So if you do well in school, somebody is going to decide what your job is. But specifically, if you want to be an astronaut, it's important to be either a scientist, an engineer, pilot in the military, or medical doctor. One of those fields. But you gotta go into something you really enjoy, because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it really well. And we get a lot of applicants for the astronaut job. So you need to be in one of those fields, and you need to be one of the best at it. So it all starts with doing well in school.
Thank you very much for talking with me today.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it.